Today, Homo sapiens are scattered across every corner of the globe. From the icy reaches of the Arctic to the scorching deserts of Africa, humans have settled in places once thought impossible to inhabit. These lands, whether they be the deep jungles of the Amazon or the windswept plains of Mongolia, are now home to us all. We've adapted, evolved, and overcome nearly every obstacle the Earth has thrown our way. Yet, this wasn't always the case. There was a time, not so long ago, when human beings were confined to a small corner of the planet, the heart of Africa. It all began here, on the vast open grasslands of Africa, where our ancestors first made their mark. The cradle of humanity, as we often call it, is where our journey began. But the exact place, the exact moment when Homo sapiens first emerged, is still debated. Evidence suggests that early humans roamed throughout the African continent, leaving behind the bones and tools that would piece together our origins. In southern Ethiopia, the oldest human skeletons dating back around 233,000 years have been uncovered, offering us a glimpse into the distant past. But some experts point to the wetlands of Botswana, where ancient fossils suggest a different story, a story of life thriving in the shadows of Africa's great rivers. No matter where it began, one thing is clear: this was only the beginning. From these roots, we would slowly, steadily, and almost instinctively begin to spread across the planet. Our ancestors, not bound by the limitations of geography, set out on a journey that would span tens of thousands of years. The first step was into the Middle East. From there, the trail would lead us into Europe, East and South Asia, eventually reaching the farthest corners of the Earth, Oceania and the Americas. But how did this happen? How did humans, who once walked the African savanna, come to inhabit the entire globe? This question has captivated researchers and storytellers alike for centuries. The answer lies in the southern dispersal, also known as the Great Coastal Migration. This wave of migration, beginning around 70,000 years ago, saw humans moving along coastal routes from Africa out across the globe. It was a journey unlike any other, one that spread across vast distances but over a surprisingly short period of time in terms of history. And while the story of Homo sapiens spread across the world is one of resilience, exploration, and survival, it is also a story filled with fascinating encounters with strange lands, unfamiliar creatures, and other human species. Before we dive deeper into the migration of Homo sapiens, let's take a step back in time. While our story begins in Africa, we weren't the first humans to venture out. That distinction belongs to Homo erectus, an ancestor of ours, who first left Africa over 1.8 million years ago. These early humans were the first to leave the continent and explore parts of Asia and Europe. Unlike Homo sapiens, who eventually conquered the globe, Homo erectus ventured out in small, isolated groups, making their way to the Middle East and eventually across the vast expanse of Asia. Homo erectus, known for their distinct upright posture and unique body structure, were true pioneers. They reached as far as the Arabian Peninsula, the Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia. Some would even island hop across what would later become the Malay archipelago, while others would push eastward, reaching what is now China and the Korean peninsula. Their journey, however, would be limited. Homo erectus would not make it to the far north, where the Neanderthals would one day thrive. But this migration laid the groundwork for the future of human expansion. And as time went on, some populations of Homo erectus would evolve into distinct species, like the Neanderthals, who adapted to the cold environments of northern Eurasia. As Homo erectus made their mark across the globe, Homo sapiens were quietly evolving in Africa. Around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, we began to take shape, not just physically, but culturally as well. We hunted large game, crafted tools, and began to adapt to our surroundings in ways our predecessors had not. Our evolution wasn't rapid. It took thousands of years for Homo sapiens to truly become what we recognize as ourselves today. But when we finally emerged as fully anatomically modern humans, it was clear that we were different. We were ready for the world outside. It wasn't until around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago that our ancestors first began to leave Africa. In the first 100,000 years of human migration, small groups of Homo sapiens began to fan out from their origins in the Rift Valley, moving into what is now northern Africa and parts of the Middle East. These early pioneers laid the foundation for what would become the Great Coastal Migration. But their journey, unlike that of their Homo erectus cousins, would be marked by new tools, new social structures, and the development of language. The first human migrations out of Africa were not the end, but the beginning of something far greater. Over the next several millennia, Homo sapiens would continue to spread. And while this migration was gradual, it was also relentless. From the heart of Africa, humans would begin to push north, west, and east. Some would move across the deserts of North Africa, while others made their way into the rich, fertile lands of the Middle East. These movements were not random, but followed the rivers, the coastlines, and the fertile regions that would sustain life. Humans were now a force to be reckoned with. And so, the story of our species begins, an epic journey that would span continents and centuries. But before we continue, I want to hear from you. Where do you think human beings truly originated? Was it in the heart of Africa or somewhere else? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this journey through the past, make sure to subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals so you won't miss the rest of our exploration into the origins of humanity. As we continue our journey, let's take a moment to understand the incredible journey that took Homo sapiens beyond the borders of Africa. Between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago, a second wave of human migration occurred. This time, a small group, perhaps no more than 1,000 individuals, set out from the Horn of Africa. Their journey would not be quick, and it would certainly not be easy. They crossed the Red Sea, reaching what we now know as the Arabian Peninsula, and began to follow the coastlines, moving along what would eventually become the shores of the Persian Gulf, Iran, and the Arabian Desert. The exact routes are still debated by scientists, but one thing is certain. This was no ordinary journey. These early humans didn't simply wander aimlessly. They were trailblazers, guided by the stars, the lay of the land, and the resources they discovered along the way. This was the beginning of the southern dispersal, the Great Coastal Migration, which would eventually carry our ancestors to every corner of the earth. This migration wasn't simply about survival. It was about adaptation. These early humans encountered new environments, new climates, and new creatures. As they crossed into the Middle East and parts of Central Asia, they encountered a more temperate climate, rich with new plants and animals. Their tools adapted to these changing environments. And as they moved eastward into South Asia, their numbers grew, and their cultures began to take shape. The southern dispersal would eventually lead humans to the shores of Southeast Asia. Between 55,000 and 65,000 years ago, humans began to hop from island to island across what would become Malaysia and Indonesia. These early humans were true adventurers, crossing narrow straits and dense jungles, creating new settlements as they went. They moved with a purpose, always pushing forward. By the time they reached Australia, humans had already traveled further than any other species, conquering land masses once thought to be unapproachable. Australia was one of the greatest challenges in human migration. But the story doesn't end there. The first humans to set foot in this strange land, now separated from the rest of Asia by vast oceans, would not be deterred. They adapted to the land's peculiarities, learning to hunt the strange marsupials and surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Within just a few thousand years, these early Australians had mastered their environment, and the settlement of the island was complete. However, just as the humans of Southeast Asia were conquering new lands, the world around them was changing. The Ice Age, with its freezing temperatures and shifting ice sheets, would soon present the next great challenge, but it would also open new doors for migration. As the world's sea levels dropped, land bridges appeared, connecting what was once isolated landmass into a single, traversable stretch. The Bering Land Bridge, now submerged beneath the waters of the Bering Strait, was a critical passageway for humans migrating into the Americas. Around 40,000 years ago, a new wave of humans, our ancestors, crossed this land bridge into what is now Alaska. From there, they began their journey south. This was the beginning of the human settlement of the Americas, and it was a feat that required not only resilience, but also a deep understanding of the natural world. These humans, who would eventually become the Clovis people, moved swiftly, settling across the continent. By 16,000 years ago, humans had spread across North and South America, adapting to every environment from the frozen north to the tropical south. For thousands of years, these early humans continued their migrations, exploring the Americas, interacting with new environments, and eventually, their descendants would reach the furthest corners of the continent. The harsh terrains of Greenland and northern Canada were populated around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, while the rest of the Americas were settled much earlier, in the heat of the Ice Age. By 10,000 years ago, the migration of Homo sapiens seemed to slow, but it had far from ended. While humans had successfully colonized every major continent, there were still places left to explore, and one such place was the far-off island of Madagascar. Around 2,000 years ago, humans made their way across the Indian Ocean and discovered this isolated landmass, filled with giant lemurs and other strange creatures. Here, once again, humans proved that nothing could hold them back, continuing their legacy of exploration. And as humanity continues to migrate today, we are still driven by the same urge to explore, to understand, and to adapt. Modern scientists, biologists, and explorers still seek out remote corners of the Earth to unlock its mysteries. Our quest for knowledge and discovery knows no bounds, just as it did thousands of years ago when our ancestors first set foot beyond the African continent. The story of Homo sapiens, from Africa to the Americas, is a tale of determination, resilience, and adaptability. It is the story of how we became the dominant species on this planet, not through brute force, but through a relentless drive to survive, to explore, and to conquer new lands. The journey that began in the grasslands of Africa has taken us to the ends of the earth and beyond. So, what's next for humanity? Will we continue to push the boundaries of what's possible? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the spirit of exploration that led our ancestors across continents is still alive today. The journey is far from over. Let us know your thoughts on humanity's great migration and how you think the future of exploration will unfold. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals. For more deep dives into the fascinating history of humanity. We've only just begun to scratch the surface. Stay curious and keep exploring with us.